there are actually 4 dimensions to this Rammstein case. And usually what you see on the web is only one dimension being talked about. And that is the dimension of a standard criminal investigation. So roughly 24 women talked to reporters, and they told a story of visiting these concerts, and they are under the impression that somebody spiked their drinks. Now, it's a very, very large backstage crew. So for the government investigation over here, the list of suspects is fairly large. You see, the singer Till Lindemann is not carrying around equipment, and he's not recruiting women by himself for these after parties. He has crew members doing that. So from the standpoint of an investigator, it is absolutely conceivable that somebody from the backstage crew may have done the spiking, right? And this could have happened without the knowledge of the singer and without the singer ordering that. If Lindemann doesn't publicly incriminate himself, and if nobody from the backstage crew incriminates himself, then the investigation will not go anywhere. We will never know. So it is possible that the singer ordered these things, but any order would have been verbal, not in writing. And even a verbal order can be given in an opaque way. So, for example, any famous singer out there could tell his crew members, get young women, I want to have sex after the shows, make it happen, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So there's no explicit order, and the crew members, they have the drive to make the boss happy, so they can keep their jobs. One of these women told an interesting story. So according to those statements, she was confronted by the singer, Till Lindemann, and he expected to have sex with her. She clearly refused, and he was surprised by that. And he supposedly, allegedly said something like, "But they told me otherwise." Now, if that encounter happened that way, this would indicate that the singer is relying on his crew. So the crew tells him things, and he tends to believe these things. That leaves open many forms of manipulation. So somebody from the crew may have spiked some drinks, not telling the boss, and hoping that everything would play out. So the boss is happy, girls don't mind, and they can just move on to the next show. So this is what the investigation is focusing on. And this is literally everything there is right now. This is the case. This is the investigation, and we will probably never know. Now, the second dimension of that case is the problem of organized crime in the recording industry. There's quite a bit of documentation out there of many cases where artists are the target of organized crime. So, for example, artists are being lured into a trap, right, when there's alcohol and drugs, and somebody backstage may be collecting incriminating information, or just things that look bad. You know, any sort of compromising information that can be used against the artists, so you can pressure the artists into signing bad contracts. So the infamous 360 contracts, where the record industry gets all the money and all the control. And also, if a band becomes really successful and every band member at some point is a multi-millionaire, oftentimes these artists, they don't want to continue. They just want to enjoy their money and not go touring and record music and do promo. And to prevent rich artists from retiring, they could be pressured by using incriminating material. So this is something you need to be aware of, and I think any professional investigator over here in Germany or over here in Europe, any professional would consider these things. Now, on to the next dimension, which is somebody that nobody has talked about for very specific reasons, and that is the political dimension. You see, in the early 1990s, the political left in Germany, the Social Democrats, they were very concerned that young people over the course of the 90s would only listen to American music. Now, as everybody knows, American music in the 90s was super strong. So many different genres, so many different bands and acts, and it was just fabulous stuff, right? Metal music, hip-hop, pop, grunge. So completely dominating music. And the Social Democrats over here, they had a big plan. And this goes right to the top of the party. People who are in government right now. They hatched out this plan. They wanted to recruit bands and acts, preferably left-wing bands and multicultural pop acts. And they also had the plan of starting a German music television station. And this was called Viva. So the person responsible for Viva was a member of the Social Democrat Party, a man by the name of Dieter Gorni. And the record label of Rammstein, Motor Music, was also run by a member of the Social Democratic Party, a Mr. Renner. So they signed all these different bands and they pushed this stuff on the Viva Music television station with the intention of influencing the youth, turning them left-wing so they would vote Social Democrat over the coming years. Now, some members of Rammstein are fairly left-wing, even communist, and they used to be punk musicians in the former Soviet part of Germany, Eastern Germany. And the punk music scene was heavily infiltrated by the government intelligence service, the infamous Stasi. So there were informants everywhere, and one of the Rammstein band members actually had a child with a Stasi informant, a female informant. So this is kind of the craziness that went on. And so these left-wing connections brought Rammstein to Motor Music, the label, and then their music was heavily featured on Viva, the music television station. Most of the new German music was rather bad or just boring, so you had soft rock music, you had multicultural pop acts, and you had really terrible techno music. But Rammstein was different. They chose their particular style to get noticed. This was not the style some of the band members wanted to play. So this was just a means to an end for them. But fairly quickly, it became its own thing. So Rammstein music is quintessentially German. There's something really special about it, and that's why the band became so successful. Some of the communist band members, such as the keyboarder Flake, or even the singer Till Lindemann, they had this idea of using their music to be subversive, right? To talk about the problems in society and how bad it is, and the problems of the churches and all that. So this is kind of a baseline left-wing technique, and they tried to use that technique back in the old days in the communist dictatorship they lived in, but they had to be really careful back then. And after the wall came down, of course, they could be more explicit. So Rammstein songs, they pick these dark topics, which is about society, really, and then they make these songs about it. However, the band became way too big for the liking of the Social Democratic Party. Many people didn't know the band was left-wing, or many people didn't care. So even people from the political middle and even right-wingers, they started to listen to Rammstein, and it was celebrating that music. Rammstein even became very famous in Russia. And then something interesting happened that nobody wants to mention. Right after Russia invaded Ukraine, the band positioned themselves explicitly pro-Ukraine. And right now, the Social Democrats are running the government here in Germany. And it's the very same people who had this music culture agenda during the 1990s with the label Motor Music and the television station Viva. Same people, and those very same Social Democrats tended to be extremely pro-Russia up to 2014 and to a lesser degree up to 2022. So now this becomes a political issue. The band has become a problem for the Social Democrats. And this may play an actual role in this Rammstein scandal. So there's a clear motivation to harm the band, to destroy the band, destroy its image, and present the band as reactionary and right-wing and present it as toxic masculinity. So this is something you need to keep in mind. This is a whole political dimension that nobody's talking about. Now, the press over here probably knows this, but they're not talking about it, possibly because they want to avoid any sort of trouble with the Social Democratic government. And this leads me to the fourth and final dimension of the case, which is an intelligence dimension. There are some good books out there detailing decades of pop culture history during the Cold War and how intelligence agencies from the East and the West were involved. So this was a really, really big issue. So Western radio stations, they were blasting their music into the Eastern Bloc, and the communists tried to jam those signals, but they couldn't really do that everywhere. And so many people living under communism, they started to listen to Western music, which was sort of rebellious, right? So that's why communist intelligence tried to gain knowledge of all kinds of Western bands. And to some degree, Western bands could perform in the Eastern Bloc under very specific conditions. And for example, the KGB or the Stasi, they would clear beforehand if there was going to be any trouble by letting these bands in, letting these bands perform. So it is not uncommon for Russian intelligence to infiltrate the environment of a band. It's not hard to do, and it's not expensive either. So once a band is as big as Rammstein, especially a band which is famous in Russia, and then when it comes to the Ukraine war, this is more than enough reason for Russian intelligence to place assets in Rammstein's environment, or to recruit people as assets from Rammstein's environment. Now, some people who are not familiar at all with intelligence work, they do not really understand the motivations behind all this. And they tend to ask, why would Russia bother? Because they're so busy with the Ukraine war. Why would they even care? Well, because Rammstein was really, really huge in Russia. It's really huge in Europe. It was sort of a cultural bridge between Germany and Russia. But after the Ukraine war, the Ukraine invasion, Rammstein positioned themselves clearly pro-Ukraine. So, Russia has the motive to harm the band, to destroy the band's image, and this may play a role in this whole scandal. Now, one particular person backstage who was tasked with recruiting girls and women for the after-show parties, that one specific person in Rammstein's crew was a woman, even a Russian woman. Now, that, of course, leads us to investigate further, but virtually anybody in the crew could be a Russian asset. That's just the reality of how these things work. I am fairly certain the German press is aware of that dimension, because they've written specific articles about that Russian woman, and they just they never were explicit. They never ever mentioned a possible intelligence dimension, but they strongly hinted at it. And these are usually papers who do quite a few stories about intelligence matters concerning the Russians. So they likely know. There's a lot of smoke and there may be fire. But for some weird reason, they never ever mention even the possibility of intelligence operations here. And this may be because Social Democrats run the government now. And the same Social Democrats who built Rammstein, who had played a big role in making Rammstein famous. Their songs were played all day long on German music television and on the radio. So same Social Democrats made Rammstein, and these Social Democrats were heavily involved with the Russians and the pipeline deals and all of that. And now it's become a big incident. So they don't want this to turn into a diplomatic, political incident or geopolitical incident. So that's why I believe nobody has been talking about a possible intelligence involvement by the Russians. So we can focus on one particular scenario because we prefer that scenario, because we want one scenario to be true. Now, I've been listening to Rammstein's music since the mid-90s, right? Because I saw it on music television. I like the music, but I don't have any special loyalty to a band, and I don't take my worldviews from musicians, right? So you have to be aware of your own biases. You have to be aware of everybody else's biases, right? And this case could be either way, right? You can't politicize it in a way that it becomes just a woke issue, right? So Till Lindemann may possibly theoretically be just another Bill Cosby, but there's many other ways this had all unfolded. So just be aware of that.